have a niche. It's so important to have a niche, even a micro niche, because like many business people, I was afraid to lose customers. So it led me to be a generalist. So for instance, we do localization services. We translate from English into many languages and many languages into English. Having a specialty, now I realize, is so important, not just for my industry, which is localization, but for anything.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And if you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Levent Yildizgoren, and I'm sure I slaughtered the last name, but I tried my best.
No, that was good. That was good.
But Levent was born in Turkey, grew up in the UK, studied and learned in university for about a year, had an opportunity come up to work in the print trade, so decided to go down that path. Gave him a lot of understanding of printing, was in the printing business for about 15 years, decided to join his wife's business and made the leap over the span of a couple weeks. The timing wasn't the best. The UK was in a recession, had 2 small kids, but didn't think about it at the time. Decided to go for it anyway, and then it was a language translation service, if I remember. And then the business had about 10 employees, and then there was a ski accident that came along and gave them a bit of time to reflect. Explored a few other opportunities. Now with COVID, decided to get into a bit of podcasting as well as writing books, and jumped into that. Stepped back from the wife's business a bit, but still does a bit of that as well as consulting for other businesses. So, with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Levent.
Thank you, Devin. Glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So I just took a much longer journey and condensed it in the 30-second version. So let's unpack that a bit and tell us how your journey got started with being born in Turkey and growing up in the UK.
Well, very much, yes. I was 18 years old when I came, when my parents sent me to the UK to continue with my education. I was 18 years old, and I did my A-levels and then started working in the printing trade, and loved it because it was all before the digital age. So I had a chance to learn all the kind of the theory, science behind it. It's not just pressing buttons, but more like all the theory and what the color is, what it means, how does print work. So it was great fun. I did a bit of production management courses. So I educated myself.
One question before we get too far into the printing business, because you grew up in Turkey, or born in Turkey, grew up in the UK, and then you went and studied at university for about a year. What made you decide, hey, rather than continuing on down the university path, you'd instead get into printing?
Well, actually, I didn't end up going to university. It was I did all the preparations, like what they call in the UK A-levels. That's almost like university preparations. But then the job opportunity came up, and then it was too exciting for me to miss it. And also I felt a bit guilty because it was costing my parents a lot of money because they were earning the money in Turkey and then trying to finance it for the UK education with the exchange rates and everything. I felt a bit guilty, and when that opportunity came up, I didn't think too much about it, so I just grabbed it, and I'm glad I did, because it was opportunity of a kind of lifetime, because it enabled me to understand everything in print, and it pretty much laid the foundation for what I will do next in my life.
Oh, that's
so in
awesome.
that respect, I'm not regretting that.
Well, good. It sounds like it turned out to be definitely a great opportunity. It was one where you had different plans, and I certainly get. I mean, I went through. I'm probably the opposite, although my parents didn't only pay for part of my education, but I went through and spent a whole bunch of money on education. Wouldn't change it for the world, but there is definitely both a tangible cost as well as an opportunity cost. And it sounds like for you, the path of going into the printing business was a great opportunity and one that just didn't make sense to pass up at the time. And so now you're
Very
doing
much,
that.
very much.
And so you were doing the printing business, and you did that, I think, for about 15 years. Is that right?
15 years, yeah, I did 15 years, and then it was by then the digital side was trying to getting introduced, but at the same time, the business that my wife set up, a translation business, was booming, and I was helping her on the side. Okay, it was getting a bit tired, and but I was loving that as well. But when we got a contract to do a job that would last probably 10, 12 months, I knew it was time to give up my job for good and then join her for full time. So it was a bit of a decision of the spur of the moment. Would I do it now? Probably not, because thinking about it, what I know now, we didn't have a purchase order for the contract. We didn't have any paperwork. So it was all like so much excitement. And it was something that I wanted to do very much. And so didn't think too much about it, handed in my notice. 2 weeks later, full time on that project. And we done the project, finished it successfully.
One question just on that is so, because I mean, you've been in the printing business, as you said, for about 15 years, and then within a matter of a couple of weeks, you'd given it or put in your notice, jumped over to your wife's business full time, and even mentioned that the timing maybe wasn't great. UK was going through a bit of a recession. You had a kids,
2 small kids, yeah.
What was the motivation or reason? What made you kind of within the space of 2 weeks go from, hey, I've been in the printing business for quite a good period of time, 15 years, to jumping over to your wife's business?
Good question. I don't think it was logical. It turned out to be very logical. I'm glad I've done this. But at the time, thinking about it, it wasn't logical. It was more emotional, because I always wanted to run my own business. It wasn't the money. It was more like the freedom to make my own choices, freedom to make my own decisions. And so when the opportunity came up, it wasn't logical. We didn't open a spreadsheet and made some calculations, and it was none of that. We said that's an opportunity here. This contract, it's not gonna happen again. Then it's not going to wait for us. And we said, that's it. If you don't do it now, it'll be very hard to do it 10 years later, because as it's natural that when people are younger, they're more energetic and everything gets done a lot more easier and quicker. So we thought it's the time to do it. And we never looked back.
So now you said, okay, it's the time, kind of the opportunity is now. It's going to be, one that it's the right time of life, and, it makes sense. And so, even if it's not necessarily all in your heart or head, but more in your heart, say, okay, I'm going to jump over, going to work with the wife on her business, take an opportunity of kind of running and doing your own business, opposed to working for someone else. Now, as you make that transition, how did it go? Was it a great opportunity? You loved every minute of it? Was it stressful working with your wife? And was it hard to do through the UK? Or kind of how did that go for you as you decide, okay, I'm going to make that jump over?
It went very interestingly. We had 2 small kids, and we were working from our home because we didn't have time to set up any office or anything like that. So because the project started, and we had like French doors. So these are doors with lots of glass in between. So we had a dining room. So we closed the French doors, and that was our office with 3, 4, 5 computers, printers, and we had 2 small kids. And so we had to, luckily we found a babysitter, childminder. So it was a traumatic experience, actually. I'm laughing now, but it was at the time very hard. So we had 2 small children with the childminder sitting at the other side of the room with the French door closed, but we could see them. And every time phone rang, it's not like this now. People are now very proud to say that I'm working from home. Please excuse if my children start crying or my cats start jumping around. At the time, it was really like hard to say I'm working from home. So every time phone rang, we would say, children, be quiet, turn the TV down. And the poor children were sort of trying to be quiet and everything. And so it was a kind of traumatic experience. And towards the end of the day, my daughter at the time, she was like 4 or 5, and she would come to the door and say, Mommy, why can't you come to this side? So it wasn't easy at all, but somehow we made it work. But because we wanted it so much to run our own business, we made it work. But the first few years, it wasn't easy at all. I mean, once we finished that large project, we moved out of the house. So we had our proper office and everything. But yeah, no, it wasn't easy at all. But it was fun. It was fun because we did something that was totally in our control. And over the years, we got the benefits from that exercise. So it was good. So I would recommend it to anyone who's thinking about it. And it's very hard to make. I had a friend a few years ago. He wanted to start his own business, and it was all about spreadsheets, calculations, plans and plans and plans. He was so busy doing planning, he forgot his gut feeling. He forgot he kind of all the planning. Okay, I'm not suggesting you shouldn't plan. Definitely, planning is important, but the planning shouldn't kill the passion. Some of the decision has to be done on emotional basis. So that's how we did it, and it was hard, but I'm glad we did it.
No, I think that's awesome. I think that definitely, I think that is the thing. I worked from a little bit similar to you, probably a little bit later or later on, but I also worked from home for a good period of my career, and it was kind of the same thing. Now with COVID and people lockdowns and working from home, it's become a bit more normal that if you have a kid in the background or something's loud, that people are a lot more understanding. But for a while there, I had my office door, and the whole family knew that if the office door was shut, it means that you didn't come in, you listened before before you knocked, so it didn't interrupt the meeting. Just part of the doing at that. But I think that it also presents that opportunity. It's one that you got to work with your wife, you got to be there with the kids a bit more, and you got to just explore it. And so it sounds like it was a great phase of the journey, even if it wasn't all the easy road that everybody always thinks it is.
No.
Now with that, go ahead.
I mean, you and I know it's never easy running your own business, but if you have the passion to do it, I think the difficulties soon are forgotten.
Absolutely. So now I couldn't agree more. So now as you've done that and you work there, how long did you work with your wife on her business?
Well, we still are working. But what happened is, I mean, that's going back now. This is our 30th year. This is our 30th year. So, it's a big year for us, round numbers. It must be, we're going to create a bit of a buzz around it. I mean, the business has evolved tremendously in 30 years. Now I had a pleasure of stepping back to write my book. That was April last year. And so I wrote my book. It's been published, Good Business in Any Language. I think I'm proudly displaying the banner behind me. And so that was published in Amazon in October last year. And because it worked so well, and during that time, the business grew, so I said to my colleagues, I said, guys, you don't need me. You have grown the business. And of course, the purpose of the book and the podcast that you kindly mentioned that I'm running is all about promoting the business. So I said, you don't need me anymore. So what we did, the arrangement which was temporary, we made it permanent. A colleague who was an acting managing director, we promoted her to be the managing director. So I've taken a role to really develop the business further, try to reach even a wider circle of potential customers, and also not just business, but also do more of our charity type of work, because we've been running this translation competition with 3 universities for the last 9 years, which we are something very proud of, because we are such a small company, but we've been doing this for 9 years. And it takes about a month, but it means at least like it's a month of couple of our team members. So, you know, they have to step back and coordinate this competition. But it's very rewarding, because the students who take part, they find jobs and they come back and say, thank you, we've done this. Now we got students who graduated, works for Apple, Facebook, some of the larger companies, and it makes us really proud. So yeah, it is, business has evolved tremendously. We are a team, we have an office in Turkey now. So the tools we use and everything is all based on working remotely. So yeah, it's good that things have evolving, and we are just, you know, keeping up pace with the changes.
No, and that definitely sounds like it's been a good evolution as well. Now, one question I had that you jumped over, I think, a bit or in this conversation, but we talked a little bit before the podcast on, was that you also had I think it was you, if I remember right, that got in a ski accident, which also gave you the time to sit back and reflect a bit more, which was part of the genesis for making that transition and doing some of the podcasts and the book. Is that right?
Very much, David. Because in 2009, I mean, I love skiing, and you know, I love stuff to do with adrenaline, you know, and 2009 Christmas, I never forget that. Skiing with my daughter in French Alps, I had this awful accident, and so it was, you know, quite bad. Luckily, it was attended straight away. Broke my hip, but it was so badly broken, I was advised to lay down for 6 months, because some of the hip accidents, after 2-3 months, they ask you to step on it, because as there's pressure on the bones, it helps it heal better because of the blood circulation and everything. But mine was broken so badly, they said you can't step on it. And so 6 months, I had to lay still. Only time that I was allowed to move is when I went to the lavatory, and any time that wasn't really just moving from one place to another, and the other 6 months was on crutches. So that's like 12 months. And during that time, I had an opportunity to reflect, and I realized that having a network of great people around me, not just my family was great. I mean, you know, my wife, you know, she couldn't do enough, and it was a lot of hard work. And family, of course, I was grateful to them, but also my colleagues. They all stepped up. You know, I couldn't go to work. When I went to work after 6 months, I had like a chair there for me. Everyone was like trying to welcome me and everything. But what made me really sort of almost like at the time I was very tearful even, that the business continued, colleagues stepped up, and I said, you know, so the life is about making connections and building bridges and everything. So, you know, after that year, we started the competition. We also do a lot of charity work. So, you know, it has made a fundamental effect on my on my approach. You know, having people around you is so important. And I realized that I was so lucky that, you know, so I said, what can we do so that people who are not that lucky, that how can we make some change in their lives? So yeah, that was really an accident that I'm trying to forget. But in certain ways, it was interesting that it happened, which enabled me to do things that I'm doing now.
Oh, it sounds like,
So
you know, certainly you wouldn't ever want to, if you had the decision to go through the accident, sound pretty painful and a long path to recovery, but also sounds like it gave you a lot of time to to reflect and
Yeah,
to think about, kind of the next phase and the next direction, which leads you to now where you're doing the podcast, you're writing the book, you're looking at a bit more charitable organizations, as well as still continuing to work on and assist with the business and doing some of those things. So that definitely sounds like it was a good pivotal point for yourself along your journey.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, no, so now as we kind of get to where we're at in the present, and that kind of brings us to where you're at now, I always like to transition and have a couple questions I always ask at the end of each journey, or to bringing it to the present time. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
Well, good question. I don't think there was one. There was few bad decisions. I think one of the it's hard to say one, but there's a particular one that actually I was talking to somebody today about this. It was we had somebody worked for us for like 6 months, and it was really good chemistry there. Because what I like, Devin, is that when I choose a team member to join the company, and the values, the core values are so important, because we need to have the same core values, and everything else can be secondary. But if there are no core values, then there's no connection. So we had the right core values and everything, but somehow we couldn't hold on to them. Now, knowing what I know now, I should have tried everything to make sure that they stayed with the company. So that's probably one of my. It was like not decision. I didn't decide to let him go, but I didn't do enough for them to stay on. So it was something I regret. And what I learned from that is that if I see a good people that matches our core values, make sure do everything to make sure that they stay with the company.
No, I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, there isn't always a trade-off. You're not always, or sometimes employees, you just can't match the salary expectations or can't provide the opportunity, and there are reasons why they leave. But oftentimes you don't realize the value of the employee or the amount of contribution they make until they're gone. And then you're saying, hey, that was something that I probably should have tried harder to keep them around. So I think that there's certainly an understandable mistake to make, but also a great one to learn from.
Yeah. I think we get wiser, as we get older. And I mean, definitely that's for me. You're a young man, but yeah, I can see that I'm getting wiser as I'm getting older, and it's easier to talk about the mistakes that I did, whereas at the time it probably wasn't that easy to talk about it.
No, and I think it's it's always one where sometimes we want to forget our mistakes or we want to move on from them, and certainly understandable why. But a lot of times that's where we get a lot of the learning that comes about, that we then are able to better run the business afterwards. So I think that it's one where it makes sense to appreciate you sharing it. Second question I'll always ask is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Well, my one, I mean, there's many, as you know, there are many things that we can say based on our experience. Probably what I would suggest to them is that have a niche. It's so important to have a niche, even a micro niche, because like many business people, I was afraid to lose customers. So it led me to be a generalist. So for instance, we do localization services. We translate from English into many languages and many languages into English. Having a specialty, now I realize, is so important, not just for my industry, which is localization, but for anything. Having a niche. If you're a personal trainer, have a niche. Working with certain age group or achieving something for certain maybe gender or age group or certain disabilities. If you're a doctor, having a niche. I mean, the doctors are probably the best example. if I have a serious condition, I don't go to my family doctor, I go to the specialist. And now I realize that this applies to everything, but I was too worried initially to have a niche, thinking that I will lose customers by having a niche or micro niche. But now I realize that was totally wrong. So my advice is, whatever your profession is, whatever the industry you're in, have a niche. That makes such a big difference.
No, and I think that definitely is a great piece of advice. And I think that, to your point, a lot of times you worry that if you have a niche or that you have a focus, that then you'll miss out on that other business that could have come through your door because you're too niche down. And yet, on the other hand, I think that it helps to differentiate yourself and set you apart. As if you have that niche, then people know why they should come to you and why you're different than the competition. So I think that's a great takeaway. Well, as we wrap up the podcast, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to read your book, they want to listen to your podcast, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Thanks for asking, Devin. I really appreciate that. Well, I'd love to offer a free download of my book, Good Business in Any Language, to your listeners. They can visit Levent.team. That is Levent, Levent.team, TEAM. And there they can download the ebook free of charge, or they can purchase the Kindle version from Amazon. And there are some also goodies as well. Otherwise, I'm available on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions anyone throws at me, or anybody wants to connect, talking about international trade, localization. I'll be more than happy to reply to any listeners that would like to connect with me.
Awesome. I definitely encourage people to reach out, connect, and utilize your services, as well as take advantage of the ebook that you offered. And so definitely encourage people to connect there. Well, thank you again, Levent, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the show. Also, as a listener, make sure to click subscribe, share, listen, review, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all of these awesome episodes. And last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Levent, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you, Devin. It was a great pleasure to be on the show.